How's it going, everybody? This is Trey Bell, and this is Arcane Frequencies. And tonight we're going to be reviewing the album Gray Oceans by CocoRosie. So, start out with how I got into the group duo, the sister dynamic, CocoRosie. So, CocoRosie, like I said in my Animal Collective video, this is another band that when I first learned about them, I got into them like really, really hard, like really deep to the point where like I literally spent days just binging their music because I was just so amazed by how out there their stuff was and just how legitimately weird and just but mystical it was at the time. And for me, like I've said in previous videos, I've always tried my best to find out there strange music, and I would have to say I hit the nail on the head when I took a chance with this band because the way that I actually discovered them was like when I was living in Illinois, in my hometown, Bloomington Normal, Illinois. I was actually cutting my grass, and Spotify was a thing, but of course this is during the time period when iTunes still was like on the rave. Well, of course, like iTunes now is what people call Apple Music today, but this is just like when literally there was just nothing but the iTunes store. You know, it really hadn't expanded in that type of way yet, but I I primarily always used iTunes even before Spotify or Pandora or any of those streaming services like were available in a way where they had like the legitimacy that they do now. And when I was cutting the grass, I it came to my head that I was like, I want to like just discover a band or a group of any artist and just base it off the album cover. I want to see what's the weirdest album cover that I could find, like in like my i my iTunes recommended, and one of the first things that caught my eyes was CocoRosie's Tales of the Grass Widow album. And that cover, it was just bizarre. It's just literally like, it looks like a mannequin or like a dead woman or someone who's like just ghostly. It's very kind of uncanny, low key, but also just very. It was just unique to me at the time. I was like, all right, this is definitely a weird band because one thing I realized about a lot of indie music at that time is like indie music actually introduced me to the whole concept that you don't need to always have your face on the album. Like, I still was like very used to like the traditional sense of music where, you see like a album cover of like, I listen to a lot of rap too. So like a lot of rap during like the 2000s and kind of still within like the 2010s, I guess, still had like a you always saw like the artist's face on the cover. And I definitely at this time was more in tune with like, oh, so you don't always need like the artist's face on the cover. You can just represent the album with like cool artwork, and I really love that. Like, and even in my music to this day, I don't even put myself in the album cover. I just want to like base the album off like the artwork and actually, because I'm really big. Oh, I'm an artist myself, and I'm really big into album artwork, and so I have a very special place in my heart for that. Back to the subject. Overall, when I started listening to the first snippet on iTunes, and I immediately was just like, yep, this is weird. This sounds cool. I want to listen to this band. And what I usually did at that time period was like if I discovered a new artist in whatever shape or form, I would immediately go to Spotify and just see what their discography was like and see where they started and where they begin. And of course, like if I could tell there was some stuff that was like didn't seem consistent enough, or I always would go to Wikipedia always just to see the full discography and make sure like I knew if I was getting every single thing. And unfortunately, Tales of the Grass Widow actually was not on Spotify at the time period, even though like the album had been out for a good while, and it took a while before Spotify actually put the album onto like their platform. And again, this is 2013, so this is still like when Spotify was like it was popular enough, but it really wasn't always good at like the updates of like certain bands or artists, specifically even if like they were indie, like they the processing of like getting everything on Spotify was probably a little bit not as efficient as it is today. But so I kind of just had to start off with Gray Oceans, which of course is the album I'm reviewing right now, and that was their latest album, and that album actually came out in May 3rd, 2010. Oh, it's almost about to be May. So yeah, this album will have been out in for like a good 11 years now. Yeah, nice. So either way, this was a like, and I'll be honest, like when it came to listening to this album specifically, it really didn't. It's not that it didn't leave an impression on me, but like the band itself, like Sierra and Bianca, that's their names, the sisters. They just them as a whole just interest me. So like I think I just was going from like album to album and just like I definitely binged like their whole entire like uh album from of Gray Oceans, and then I just kind of like picked and choose like all their other discographies throughout the 2000s. And but a lot of my favorite songs from them in particular that like I had on repeat was We Are on Fire. And that actually wasn't even an album. It was just that song where that came from. That it really wasn't even on an album. It was just actually a 2-song EP, like not even an EP. It was technically it was a single. So, but it only had the song We're on Fire and another song called Animals or something saying Are You in Love with Humankind. And yeah, a lot of like. Yeah, again, I was trying my best to explore as much music as possible and find the most interesting and strangest stuff out there. And this definitely was the next step into the direction of like me listening to, bands that were just arcane and just weird and just very, just very particular. And yeah, CocoRosie was one of the beginnings of like a more extreme version of legitimately avant-garde music for me. What attracted me most about their music was primarily how mystical it was. It felt like I was living in a different world or earth or just plane of existence. Their music is also like very witchy but in a very beautiful way. Like the thing about both the sisters, Sierra Rose and Bianca Liani, Bianca Leilani. Sierra Rose and Bianca Leilani Cassidy. Yeah, they have a very interesting way of fusing so many different sounds together that it's incredible. If anything, like I would definitely. They're actually, I would say, I think they are in the same category as like Animal Collective. Like they are considered under the New Weird America genre and freak folk. So specifically freak folk, and so when listening to the music, it is pretty psychedelic in a sense. Even though I don't think it's going for a psychedelic term of just like to something to trip out. I think it's just more they actually want to use this to convey a certain aesthetic and atmosphere of like what they're talking about in their music, and a lot of the subject matters in their music is pretty heavy shit, I'll be honest. Like, and it's funny, for the longest time it took me a while to realize what their subject matters were about, because I'll be real, I was a very oblivious kid at the time period. I was a teenager, lived in a small town around cornfields, and hey, that was a spider. And, I didn't really know much about the outside world other than, like, my small little town and, like, all the social issues that were going on. I mean, of course, like, I know the basics of social issues, but when it comes to, specifically, like, feminism and women who've gone through sexual abuse and trauma, like, yeah, somehow, yeah, all that really just flew over my head when I first heard their music, because, and in a sense, like, it makes sense because, like, yeah, this is, like their music is just so like weird. Is legit, like they legitimately try to make weird music to like be off kilter. That was the main thing that always just captivated me. Like even if I didn't fully understand what the lyrics were always talking about, and like again, like when listening to indie music, sometimes I feel like it wasn't all it didn't I feel like a good majority of indie music really isn't always about the lyrics. It's just more about the music itself. So like unless you're a true hardcore fan, then you'll read the lyrics, and I have read some of their lyrics, but like when I did, I was just like, that's like when I realized like, oh, like these girls have gone through some shit. And even when you look at some of their interviews, like you can tell like they've been through some dark shit. Because like that was like kind of what confused me, because I love their music, but like watching their interviews, it just felt very dejected. And as like I got older, and especially around the time of going to college and just starting to like, because when I went to college, I was expecting that there were going to be a lot of people who were into this band. And I'm pretty sure there were definitely people who knew about them or knew them, but no one who was really into them like I was. And then I also started realizing like they have a lot of controversy around their name. Like people do not like CocoRosie apparently. And of course, as like time goes on, more and more, like I started picking up, like I've been listening to CocoRosie since 2013, and it's 2021 now, so 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I've been listening to them for almost 9 years at this point. So up until like literally like maybe 8 like of recent, like I started fully understanding like why they aren't that liked by a lot of people. Because even when I was in college, like anytime I asked to put on CocoRosie, a lot of people were like, nah, I don't really want to listen to CocoRosie. But I could tell it was like a nah, because they just were very disinterested in them in general. Like not even just like as a casual listen, like it's just like I could tell there was a certain disdain in certain people like whenever I brought it up, and I just was so oblivious of like why. And then lo and behold, like I recently figured out the reason why people do not like them is like, well, I would say it does contribute to one particular controversy of theirs back when they came out with their first album, La Mansion de Mon Rêve. Probably didn't say that exactly right, but close enough. In reality, all it means is it's French for my dream house, or the house of my dream. And there's a song on there which is pretty much a rendition of the song Jesus Loves Me. And again, like I said, a lot of their subject matters do deal with like trauma, especially as women being abused, raped, and probably like incest based on some of their lyrics. But they do touch on other lyrics of racism. And in this particular song, they said nigga. And yeah, both Sierra and Bianca are white. So yeah, you probably are aware that like that's probably not gonna fly well. And I remember like when I realized this, and it was funny actually for me, to be honest. Like I remember when I used to listen to that song, like the particular lyrics that I'm referring to is when they saying, Jesus love me, but not my wife, not my nigga friends, and their nigga lives. And I'm trying to sing it like Bianca, because like she just sings in like a childlike voice. And I'll be completely honest, like for a long ass time I did not know they were saying nigga. I thought she was saying nickel or something like that, but it was funny because like I always subconsciously thought she was saying nigga, and I just like pretended like she was saying it because it's like that sounds funny. And then literally 9 years later I realized like, oh shit, she actually was saying nigga. And then I researched this more, and like even like saw like some of their early like performances, like before they were even had somewhat of a fan base. You know, they just did like the little basic performance, and like they had like a black dude come on stage with them and play guitar as they're singing this song. And yeah, how I feel about it, I'll be honest, I think I get what they were going for. It just did not age well, and it probably didn't even like sit well in general anyway, because like in the beginning of their career, because like throughout their career they've just been plagued with just not being liked. And granted, I don't think they care, and I don't think they're racist. I just think they try to evoke a certain type of emotion in people and kind of putting out like the reality of like how fucked up life can be, in my opinion. That's what, and just on the whole antithesis of most of what their music is exuding, I think is kind of just stating things objectively, but probably not subjectively, or like in a way where it's like going against like racism. It's just more just kind of stating it. And like honestly, there's even like a Pitchfork article where I feel like someone explains like in the article about like their career and like how it's kind of like a, you know, it's wishy-washy, like you like them, but like at the same time, like there's still certain questionable aspects of like how they go about things or what they talk about in some of their subject matters, where it's like, if you're gonna be edgy, in reality it's just I think they were just trying to exude a certain edginess, but the execution just kind of left a lot of people just not feeling it. And I'll be honest, that's kind of like where I stand on that. Like, am I mad at them? Not that much. Like, obviously these girls have like, they operate on a different type of mindset, and also being like an artist who's, you know, involved himself in certain controversial concepts too with things I've drawn. Like, I can get the mentality, and you know, if anything, I would say like, if you're gonna do something edgy, just like, you know how you know, prepare for the repercussions of it, the consequences. And I think they've always just been about doing things in their own particular way, and like, you know, that's just gonna be their own realm, and whoever wants to be in it, like they can be in it, but like they're not compromising for how they want to operate in the world. And another thing too, like on a race subject, that like I guess like also when it comes to most people who probably would listen to them, maybe like within like the Pitchfork like ethos of culture, you know, most people will just like kind of say they're being culturally appropriating of black culture, which again, I see it, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. And that's me coming from a black person who's been listening to them for years and years. I've never fully felt affected when they do bring up subject matters that have tidbits of race, you know, problems come into it, because I think they, you know, are for the greater good. They're definitely like allied minded, but you know, but again, like I am aware there is a certain sector of culture, like especially like the feminist culture, that like I'm just not fully in tune with, and like of course I can never fully understand it. And you know, it's you know, it's just funny because for so long, like, you know, I just never knew this, because, like, I had never really connected with that many people on CocoRosie, other than, like, two girls who themselves also seem pretty mystical and out there. Like, there's certain people who I feel like who are just born into this world, like, with a very mystical-esque type of, like, personality, and it's interesting, but, yeah. But also, yeah, cultural appropriation, to go back to that, I guess also they, you know, certain other white people who've listened to the music who were, I would say, probably social justice warrior minded, probably look at them braiding their hair in cornrows or wearing certain aesthetics that you probably would see more in hip hop, but it's combined with all these other things. Like, they also like dressing up like clowns a lot, and like using, you know, toys to like use in their music and record. Like, their music is very unique. Like, for me, like, that's why I just never was aware of like this controversy that surrounded them, because it's just like, to me it's just like, dude, they are bizarre. They are legitimately so bizarre to the point it's like I can't just focus on one thing. But like, you know, apparently like, you know, some people like that was like the only straw for them to like, you know, like, nope, I don't fuck with CocoRosie. And you know, I guess I get it, but for me, I fucking like their music a lot. Like, I love it. Like, it's so out there, and it just resonates with me. Don't know why, because honestly, I definitely cannot relate to their lyrics, but like their aesthetic, I'm all for it. But that's where I'm gonna leave it with that. Overall, to get into the album, the way I want to even, this is my thesis for how I feel about this album. A continuous journey of different mystical experience set in some old-time world that never existed. The combination of orchestral instrumentation, childlike lyrics that exude to heaviness of childhood trauma from rape slash incest from family and all the darkness that plague plenty women on a daily basis. The elements of their music that seems to take stand against their emotional turmoil is expressed through their interests of nature, usually involving the likeness of witchcraft or Wicca. Grey Ocean takes all that sorrow and makes it beautiful in a particularly avant-garde, insular way. R.I.P. Burnface is the highlight for this album. And to pretty much get into the album, yeah, the song R.I.P. Burnface, I will say, is definitely one of my top 5 favorite CocoRosie songs, because they're talking about the struggles of women, and I could assume that Burnface is representing of like the concept of like certain women, and especially in certain countries, who are doused with acid, and because of their husbands or lovers or boyfriends not liking something that they've done or was done to them, and it's pretty fucked up. And I've seen these pictures, so like in reality, you know, they're really hitting hard on like the strifes of women, and I can imagine probably why it's also hard to listen to them, especially if like it's guys who are into like the indie sphere of music and that alternative world. Like it probably rubs a lot of people the wrong way, because like they're just like, I don't want to hear this. It's kind of shitty, but like at the same time, like, you know, it kind of is what it is. But it still is pretty evident that like either you like this band or not, because like when you go on Pitchfork, like Pitchfork hates this band. Like they hate CocoRosie. Like the only album that actually gave somewhat of a decent score to, and it wasn't even that great, it was just a 5, so it's just very neutral, was their first album. And everything else after that is just, they just shitted on. Like I've read most of those like reviews, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, bro. Like it's just, there's some pure ass hate when it comes to like this band. But not to stick on that too much, because like I don't want that to take away from like what I really love about this duo. But you know, both Bianca and Sierra, like I feel like what they've done for over 2 decades is just express themselves with no regards, and even if like they probably exude some things in like a way that just does not sit well with like a good majority of people, you know, they still just do what they want to do, and they still, you know, it seems like they just have an agenda to express their music in a very particular way. And honestly, I feel like you really can't knock them. But overall, like when it comes to listening to the album, it starts out with the song Trinity's Crying. And I'll be honest, I'm not really sure what a lot of these instrumentations are, or these instruments are. But man, there's some interesting instruments. All I know is that it's probably a lot of strings, a lot of woodwind, like a lot of music, a lot of like instruments that just exude nature and like that kind of mystical, almost slightly medieval type of sound to a degree. But like probably more in the realms of like, you know, probably like the Salem witch trials, because even like watching some of their music videos, like they do have a particular like witch aesthetic, and they even talk about witches sometimes in their music. And again, I would definitely say like, even though I wouldn't compare them intensely to Current 93, I would say they're kind of in the same ballpark when it comes to particular subject matters. And I'm pretty sure there's been crossovers of like certain artists who are in the avant-garde world, like, because I've definitely heard like an artist who was on a Current 93 song, and then that particular artist was also on a CocoRosie song. So I can definitely say without a doubt that they're in the same ethos of, you know, inspiration when it comes to how they make music. Just this very, very particular type of just sound. Just very misty, very whimsical, very quirky and kiddish too, but also one of the sisters is actually a orchestral trained singer, so like you have one person who's low key kind of rapping in like this very childlike voice, like, and we saw the mothers, and they saw us too, but no one ever became what we wanted to be. That's how she's. That's low key how Bianca sounds, and the other sister is also just like she sings in like this orchestral way, like it's just like, oh, it's just a interesting combination of like aesthetics, and I think that's also why I really like this group, because it's just like they really are doing something that you can't really get anywhere else. Like they really just have to be themselves, for better or for worse. Like, so I mean, even if they do things that rub people the wrong way, like I'm glad, because like they need to like stay strong in like how they want to express their music, and it makes sense why their music is probably more popular in other countries, like in the UK, because like I remember because I've always wanted to see them live, but anytime I look up like places that they perform, they're usually in places that seem very obscure, and like it's like you can only be aware if like they're gonna be there if you're part of that area, or you're just in the know of like, hey, be here. But like but it's not like popular venues like First Ave or like any other major cities. Like they literally perform in very particular places, and but in France I know they're definitely popular because of course like their first album is in France, and I think they actually recorded a lot of their music in like France in general anyway. So I feel like their lifestyle probably resides more in a different country. I feel like Americans overall probably they're probably just not as like prevalent here, because they're probably just too out there for the average music listener, or even like an intense music listener. Like again, they've been torn to shreds a lot by like certain critics, and I'm just like, damn, can I find somebody who likes them? Because I like them a lot. And but the song Trinity's Crying, it's a very interesting like vibe of just Trinity's crying, and it has a more intro interlude type of thing. You hear the toys that they use a lot in the instrumentations and the production, and then you go to the next song called Smoky Taboo, where this definitely has somewhat of a more hip hop vibe, like, or trip hop, I would say, because again they do a good fusion of so much stuff, from like just string instrumentations to very interesting quirky beats that exude like a flow, and even some slight hip hop samples, along with like other just unorthodox samples, and just a bunch of foreign instruments. I can tell, like, I cannot name a lot of these instruments that they're using, because like I know that they're woodwind or string, but like there's something different. Like maybe they're using the hurdy-gurdy or something like that. Like I remember researching about the hurdy-gurdy, but yeah. And then you got hopscotch, which is also kind of exudes a slight actually is actually kind of a, and this is another thing about their music. Like they have like a lot of like that twangy, like old time type of sound that you would probably hear from like the 20s or something, and like they exude a lot of like that old like type of like mentality in their songs. Like again, there's so many different fusions of aesthetics in their music, but it's just done so well, where it's like it transitions from orchestral to twangy to slightly hip hop to just ambience, and it's just all combined in like ways that I didn't think it was possible. And but hopscotch is primarily taken over by Sierra, where it's just more orchestral hymns, and Undertaker. I can't fully remember how that song goes, but overall, like not to stick on any particular song, because I feel like I've already explained like most of what their music, like it seems like their music is very consistent throughout their whole discography of what subject matters that they're gonna be talking about. So I mean, like, when I look at songs like Lemonade, yeah, Lemonade is definitely one of those like twangy type of like, old time, songs, but just fused in like this very orchestral type of way. And this is also another favorite song of mine. The Gallows, now like, this is actually just more of a vibe. It's more haunting, obviously talking about just gallows. Again, like their music really does feel like it's set in a different time period. So, and every time I'm like looking at particular songs, I'm always referring back to their music videos. So, if you are interested in like this band and like what they exude or like what I'm talking about, like just look at their music videos and it'll kind of it will give you the vibe of like what I think the whole antithesis of CocoRosie is about, and you can just absorb their music for yourself and see what it means to you. And oh yeah, the other song that I like a lot is "The Moon Asked the Crow." This is some good poetry too. Like again, like from Bianca's like rapping abilities, like well, very abstract rap. It's not traditional rap. Like probably something you wouldn't say is like good rapping, but it's definitely quirky and like just I would say it definitely has like the aesthetics of slam poetry. The moon asked the crow for a little show in the hazy milk of twilight. No one had to know. The moon asked the crow. That's kind of a little sample of like how the chorus of that song goes, and yeah, it's yeah, their music is just, again, to pretty much end everything off, like, Grey Oceans, along with their whole entire discography as a whole, I feel like represents this band in a very unique way where, this is a particular point in their time where I feel like this is, at least in my opinion, because I have listened to their whole discography like multiple times over the past 9 years, and I would say, album wise, this is their best album because it sounds a little bit more cohesive than their other albums, or if not just cohesive, I think it just resonates with me a little bit more. And the other album that does actually the same thing is the Adventures of Ghost Horse and Stillborn. I feel like those two, like Grey Oceans and that album, I feel like they're in the same realm, whereas like some of their earlier stuff was still trying to figure itself out, and just like they just started slowly evolving, like because their first album, honestly, their first album really isn't my favorite album, and not because of like the nigga reference. It's actually just because like I think I just love their music so much like after their first album, and it just hit me hard that like you can tell like the first album was like still amateurish, but it's strange because I actually do like this type of music that like. If anything, their first album is more neo folk or just very folky in general, and it actually has all the aesthetics of what I actually like from other artists. But I think when it comes to CocoRosie as a whole, like I'm like I just prefer their stuff later, or like stuff within the middle of their discography. And but overall, like Grey Oceans, I feel like this is one of the best representations of CocoRosie in my opinion. And if you want to check it out, if you want to do more research on the sisters and kind of get your own preference, because you know what, like I can tell they're pretty conflicted sisters with their past, although I can tell they also probably have grown out of it with because even their latest album has like more normalcy and actually has like feels like it wants to like serve a more interesting purpose, especially on a more political aspect, because they are always evolving, and it's been nice seeing them evolve since like I discovered them, because they don't come out with music like consistently. Like honestly, their last album before the recent one that came out, Put a Shine On, That came out in 2020, and the last album that came before that was their album Heartache City, and that was 2015. And I remember I was in college, and I remember I actually got the vinyl for that, and when I first got my first record player, and I was like, dope. Like, this is so fucking dope. And that was also the first time I actually got to experience like anticipating like a new album from them. Like once I had figured them out like earlier this decade. And overall, like, yeah, I can tell this is a very, it's a required taste. Like CocoRosie is definitely a required taste, whether it's sound or subject matter or just both, or just how they present themselves. Like, you either like them or you don't, and I feel like everyone has probably a legitimate reason of why not to like them, but for me, like, I just think they're just sticking to how they just want to do things, and I can appreciate that. So with that said, CocoRosie, Gray Oceans, I like you. And with that being said, I'm Trey Bell, and I am out. Peace.
There's the odor of essence, and I double